Welcome to Da Vinci's Discourse, where the minds of today's most innovative entrepreneurs are unveiled and explored. And my name is Kyle Campbell, your guide on this journey into the depths of the entrepreneurial psyche. So sit back, relax, and get ready to dive into the minds of the greats. This is Da Vinci's Discourse. So Roger, dude, it's awesome to have you here, man. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? If somebody were to ask who you are, what would you tell them?
Mm. I am an artist. I am an entrepreneur, and I'm also a human. I think sometimes we forget
Ah.
that we're human first and foremost, right before any of our other hats. So that's who I am.
I love it, man. I love how you didn't answer like what you do for a living. You answered you're a human, which is interesting. I love it, man. So if somebody were to ask you what you do for a living, then like on that side of things, because I love how you differentiated the two. What would you tell them then?
Well, thanks. So I do a few things. I'm right now a nonprofit consultant. I'm an arts entrepreneur, so small business owner in that lane. And my biggest focus or time, energy moment is really being an education leader. And I'm at the intersection of higher ed, but also K to 12. So it's a really unique one.
Oh, cool, man. So what do you consult for? Let's go down that route a little bit.
Sure. So I help nonprofit organizations develop the capacity to better serve their mission. And that's just a really long-winded way of saying help them help their communities. And, part of my master's degree really focused heavily on nonprofit management some years ago now. And I just fell in love with it from there. I said, wow, it's so amazing the work that a board of directors does for free, right? They're volunteers and they help like run the whole organization. And then you have like your leadership team, and I'm like a real nerd for organizational structures and communications. So it was just the perfect way for me to kind of use that knowledge and give back in that way. So it's been a fun journey.
Oh, cool, man. Okay, sweet. So let's say that I'm an entrepreneur, not necessarily a nonprofit, but somebody running a business for profit because I want to profit. I want to make some money, baby. So for profit, how would we go about starting that relationship off so that we can start to restructure and optimize the organization itself? Where would we begin?
Hmm. I love it. Well, first and foremost, the mindset, like you said, right? I think we all have to kind of get out of this notion of like, oh, if we're making money, we're not serving a need or a community, and that is really false. All
Yeah.
my students know, like, I'm a professor of social entrepreneurship in particular, which is really like how do you create profitable ventures that serve a community first and foremost. And a lot of people look at me kind of strange when I say that. They're like, well, how can you do both? And I'm like, well, there are many ways, right? There are many issues in the world, like hunger, um, we can just go down the list, right? It's like 6 or 7 major social issues we're all facing, and the fact that we can create businesses to address those things while also helping the founders make money for their family and for their legacy, I think is a really cool thing. Why does the founder have to suffer in that way, right? They want to eat, everybody wants to. They might have a family, right? They want to have a legacy, they want to give back to charities, and all those things require money. So I think we have to get away from this notion of like public good being over here, money being over there, and kind of marry the two in the middle.
Yeah, no kidding, man. One of the things that comes to mind when you say that is, I think Earl Nightingale used to say, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he would say, you can tell how much service somebody's doing for their community by what their living situation looks like. So you can drive down any neighborhood in America and be able to see how much service the person who owns each house is providing. And I think that's an overgeneralization, but I think there's something to be said with the amount of service being in direct proportion with the profit that you make at the end of the day. Whether it be I mean, you can measure profit in different ways too. Even in for a priest, for example, the gain could be in the spiritual realm as opposed to the material. But either way, it's in direct proportion to the service, generally speaking, and especially in the long term. And I think that's an important point. So, man, where would we begin? Let's say that you're consulting for me. Let's walk through step by step where we would start, and we can see where it unfolds.
Sure. So I love taking a holistic approach. So I would actually start by asking you more about your passion, why you're doing what you're doing.
Ah,
That's really, really important, right? Having that very clear purpose statement. So I'm Kyle and I'm doing XYZ for XYZ. Once you know what your intended impact is, that gives you such a firm foundation to survive all the difficulties that are going to come with starting a business or a nonprofit, right? So you gotta be really, really firm in why you're doing what you're doing. And I always tell my clients if the purpose is not strong enough, let's strengthen that because you can't really stop that type of work and just jump into the marketing, the sales. That's all the glamorous, pretty stuff, right? But you got to do that underground, like basement building work. So First and foremost, what is your purpose? Why are you doing what you're doing? After that, it's coming up with a really clear goal or a mission, right? Like, what is it that you want
Mission,
to achieve?
yeah.
So an
Mm,
example of that, if you're telling me, okay, I want to help the city of Philadelphia increase its arts education for kids, that's awesome, right? And you want the impact to be that every child has a free quality arts education. I love that. Then let's break that down to a digestible bit and be like, what's the main goal you want to achieve in the next like 3 to 5 years? And you might say to me, well, I want to start like an arts education program, right? Where we go into these schools and we teach dance and music and theater 3 days a week for a half hour. That's a lot more digestible, right? And from there, I say, all right, if that's the goal, then what are the action steps? And this is really important to indicate, right? What
yeah.
are the action steps that you want to take to achieve that goal? It's not the action steps I want to give you. It's not the action steps that are necessarily the best practices, but what are the action steps you want to take? And Kyle, the reason I focus on the you in this is because if it's not steps that you came up with and that you're committed to, you're not going to follow them. You might say you will, right? But then you're going to have a lot of cheat days sort of the situation and not fulfill it. So I always tell people, yeah, there are a lot of roads you can take to get to a destination, but it's got to be the road you're most comfortable with, the road you're most passionate about. And I'm living proof of that, right? I kind of absolutely followed my own path to get to where I'm at and kind of ignore a lot of the traditional, I'm not saying they weren't best practices, right? But the traditional route that a lot of people are taking, I'm like, that's cool, but I'm actually much more interested in going down this path and I'm more committed to it. So again, it's like purpose statement, goal, and then we develop that action plan that you really want to follow. And when I do that with my clients, whether they're individuals or institutions, they're normally really excited to execute the plan. And that's when
Mm.
I've done my job. If they're like, oh no, Raj, I'm not too excited about that. I'm like, all right, let's rework that plan then, because I want you to walk out feeling so excited. Like, I can't wait to hit the ground running on Monday and get my team invigorated. So that's kind of my personal process. This worked for like 12 years.
I love it, man. Yeah, and it gets you out of bed in the morning with a fire in your belly because you got that goal in mind, the why. And I think that's so important, man. I feel like that's something that a lot of people look over. Like, sure, they'll have a goal, but first of all, like you said, walking it back and having the steps that you actually want to do yourself is important to map that out. But ultimately, it's important to have the why that's behind it. I think that's where people should start when it comes to creating a venture of any kind, is the why. So much so that, and I was going to ask you, how do you know when the why is powerful enough? And you answered it by saying, when you've got that fire in your belly, you're excited to get out there Monday morning and you're ready to go. So let's say somebody doesn't have that passion, right? Because like I said, a lot of people don't start with that why; they start with the how. And I think you should start with the why, move to the how, like exactly like you just said. So how would we go about getting that why so that we've got that passion, that fire in the belly, so we're excited to get up on Monday morning and get rocking?
I love that question, Kyle. So this is what I would recommend, right? Is doing some journaling. And I know that's old school. People are like, oh, well,
Oh
like
yeah.
technology. But I'm a visual artist, right? And like I like writing and drawing and all that. So I tell people like get out a pad, paper, all that stuff, pen, and do some journaling and be like, what are the things that I see in society that need fixing? Right?
Mm,
So again, is it hunger? Is it access to education? Is it clean water? Is it affordable housing, better race relations, whatever the thing is? Like, what are the problems I see in society
mm.
that need fixing? And then what are the problems I'm most passionate about? That's really important. So you might say, yeah, hunger is like huge and this is huge, but this is actually this thing over here that resonates with me for whatever reason.
For whatever reason, we don't know why, and it's so cool, man. We don't know why these things resonate with us, but when you identify something, like for me, for whatever reason, it's helping homeless people. I've got this vision where if I can create a process using AI to automate a business for people and create a profit stream without them having to have much education or knowledge in what they're doing, because the AI will do most of the work for them, then I can enter let's say a homeless shelter, and this applies to outside the general people, the mom and pop buying their kid a backpack to go to school that don't have any money to buy the backpack, right? Generating an income source for people. But I have a vision of entering a homeless shelter and being able to hook them up with an AI system for each of them to generate income for them by running a business autonomously. And something about that fires me right up, man. I remember in my, actually, now that you say it, it's funny. I discovered it writing in my journal. I write in my journal every day. It's something I love. It's a time that I need to have every single day. And I'll never forget that time where I discovered that why. And it felt like I was flying. It was like I felt like $1 million. And it was a powerful experience. And that still drives me. And that was a long time ago. That still drives me to do and to keep discovering ways to create these autonomous sorts of sources of profit, which is It's so freaking cool. I've got three of them myself with AI ran businesses that require almost zero human input. It's just now I'm at the stage of trying to duplicate and replicate them so that they can be packaged and distributed to others. And that's the stage that I'm at right now. So I'm working
Almost
there.
like a franchise of some sort, right?
Something like that. Yeah. But fully autonomous. So because the AI, I mean, I don't know what your opinion on AI is, especially as an artist. I'd be curious to hear. But it's cool what it's able to do for generating income. What is your opinion on AI, especially from an artist's point of view, right?
Yeah, that's a really loaded question.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool thing for sure. I think it's something that we're not going to get away from. I'm
Yeah.
also as like visionary and creative as I am. I'm also a realist in a lot of ways, and it's not going anywhere, right? It's something that's here to stay, and I feel like it's important for us to get on board with it. But I think what's most important about using AI is not losing like heart or consciousness for things. So again,
Ah.
let's not plagiarize, folks. Like, let's
Yeah.
approach this in a good way, right? Where like you're not taking jobs from people, you're not hurting artists, right? People are trying to create and do things.
Yeah.
But is there, I just feel like there's got to be a way where we can all use it without harming others. And that's what I encourage people to do. The technology is advancing, is rapid, it's going to keep going. There's no question about that. But we still control the heart behind it. And
Mm.
the second we stop focusing on that human element, I think we're going down a slippery slope. So I would encourage people just don't lose the heart. Think about like if this wasn't a technology, would I do this thing I'm doing, right? So like again, when I take somebody else's stuff and claim it as mine, if it wasn't for this piece of equipment I'm using right now, and if the answer is no, I'm like, you probably shouldn't be using it in that way.
Yeah, no kidding. So where do you see the future of it going? I mean, as an artist, because you've got the worry of it plagiarizing your art and the art of your students, and then there's there's a lot of repercussions that could come from it. So I'm curious where you see the future of it going, and what do you see the solution being so that we can have that hand in hand where we give the heart, the passion, the creativity, and be able to use it as a tool instead of a replacement of that heart. Where do you see it going in the future?
That's a really good question. I think it's all about education with this, right? So it's really showing people what the tool can do first and foremost, and then really just having a standard set of best practices for it. So like these are the do's and don'ts, and then educating folks. I think when you teach this to youth, they're going to feel like they're above it. They're like, I grew up on tech. I know how to do this better than all of you like older folks. But I think it's important for us to still go to the youth and be like, although you know how to technically use this, these are like the best practices for using it. And I'm proud to say, like in the higher ed sphere, Kyle, I've seen a few schools kind of get ahead of the curve and start offering like webinars on marketing for AI, like best practices for AI, and they're integrating it into coursework. And so I see it kind of being a part of the education system down the line, where again, their whole course is on how to use this. The library is going to look very different. No longer will there be old, dusty bookshelves, but they're going to be completely like AI driven libraries at these schools. So I'm actually really excited for the capability and the possibilities. I think they'll put my artist hat on for a moment, right? Because that's more like the entrepreneur educator.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like use it. I think though, as an artist, um, I don't know about the solution for this because I think it's a really, really bigger issue, right? I think it kind of shows what's been happening in the past in a bigger way now. So, an example, right? In the past, people were sampling artists, musicians in particular, not always giving the proper credits and things like that. And now that's happening tenfold because of AI. So I think we almost have to look back at like, what's the real root of the problem? What is the real plagiarism? Why aren't we crediting each other for the work that we're producing? And then we can look at how AI can kind of help solve that issue. But this is a bigger issue in AI, right? This has been going on before it's here. So that's why I think it's a loaded question. It's very easy to blame the technology, but
Hmm.
the technology doesn't run itself necessarily, right? We're the ones doing it.
Yeah, that's true, man. It's fascinating. We have no idea what's going to come of it, especially on the education front. You mentioned a library, which the futuristic library, which is an interesting thought. The way I think about that is I think the AI is going to be able to just for some context first. I think, well, one of the things that our company does is EPUB.ai. It's a publishing company where I interview people and we transcribe those interviews into books using AI. And one of the things we do with that is at the end of each chapter, we'll have a prompt to kind of interact with the book. So it's at the end of each chapter, paste this into ChatGPT and it can create a dialogue based on this chapter. And I think that's an interesting route to go because it kind of tailors the education to each person. But on top of that, where I see it going is being able to generate a book in real time for each individual based on how they're most likely to absorb it and resonate with it and learn from it. So if imagine this, imagine if an AI scanned your digital presence, all your social media, maybe all your journals, so it understands you at a deep level and then is able to you give it a book and you say, okay, so give this back to me in real time based on how I would most likely resonate and learn the most from it and get the most from it. And it will restructure and rewrite the book for you in real time based on what it deems that you'll resonate with the most. And I see that happening. What do you think about that from an educational point of view?
Yes. I think it's really cool. I don't know, it's kind of like how our TV experience is now, right? Like gone are the days where we just kind of have to sit through commercials and have like three channel options. And I just love how you're using this in the literary sense now. Like, hey, we can customize our books and our reading experience tailored to our interests. Really, it's kind of like I said, the equivalent of TV and streaming to me. So I think it's actually really awesome.
Yeah, have you seen the show Bandersnatch on Netflix? I don't know if you have. It's
Yeah,
like it's an interactive kind of a show where every like 15, I don't know, let's say every 2 minutes there's an option just to change like should you go out the door or should you go out the front door or the back door? And if you choose each one, it completely unravels an entirely different storyline based on what choice you made. And it goes on. It's like I can't imagine how difficult it would have been for them to make because they had to make like 15
yeah,
movies to make one show, which is,
exactly.
you know what I mean? But that's what
Yeah.
I see the future of it going is being able to have that interactive experience with things. And I wonder where that would go for art because I mean, I think there's always going to be a market for human generated is the wrong word, man. Human created art,
Yeah.
like hand painted, beautiful, resonating with the soul art. I think that's yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so
Paint
that's
them
what
all, yeah.
yeah, dude, and I love the sunset one, the back behind you to the left, your left. It's
Oh,
up in the
thank you.
mountain there. It's beautiful, man. So that's what I mean. And so art is something that's always going to touch the soul. And it's interesting to see how AI is going to tailor into that. So anyways, we kind of got off track. So we were talking about the why, being able to have the passion that goes into the work. So you're excited to get up on Monday morning. And what would you say is the key to continuing to have that fire because yeah, you can go to a Tony Robbins event, have that fire, be all excited, and then next week you're like, oh man, it's it's back to the grind.
Exactly.
So how do you keep that passion in your belly? Keep reminding yourself of the vision of the why.
I think it's different for everybody, right? So as I've coached and consulted like hundreds of folks at this point, right? And some people are really driven by different things. It's actually shocking how different it can be. So one
Yeah.
client is already like, the money is what keeps me going because I know when I'm going, I want my kids to have blah, blah, blah. Right? For somebody else, it's like I'm absolutely committed to the hometown that I grew up in and I want to see it elevate within the next 15 to 20 years. So I think for the why, it's got to be a very personal thing, and you got to remind yourself about it every day. But it takes work, it takes nurturing, kind of like any relationship would, right? It's like
Hmm.
any kind of a familial relationship, romantic relationship. It takes time, it takes conversation, all that, right? It's the same thing with this. You kind of got to keep reading the journal. You got to keep reminding yourself of the mantras, keep envisioning the impact you're having, and that's really what helps me the most is the impact. It's really not the money, the visibility, all that other stuff. But it's really like, how am I helping my intended target audience?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when I get in the slump of it is when I feel like I'm not impacting folks in the way I wanted to or enough. So I always got to remind myself, like, this is the potential of it, right? You might be helping 20 today, but then tomorrow you could be helping 200 if you do X, Y, Z. And so I encourage people when you're having those down times, envision the success. What does this look like to you? What does it feel like? Imagine yourself on stage winning that award, receiving
Hmm.
that honor, shaking the hand of that graduate, right? Whatever that thing is for you, go to that power visualization. And that really should help get you up in the morning because you're like, all right, even though I'm not there today, I could be there tomorrow. And that hope of tomorrow always keeps me going for sure. Because Kyle, as an entrepreneur, there's some days where it's just not making any financial sense, any sense on paper, and you're like, why am I doing this? But that's when I just have to kind of tap in there and say, oh, it's for that future generation.
And then generations afterwards. That's what's so cool about it is we can create this domino effect where and it goes on infinitely. That's what's so amazing about having an impact in this world is the generational effect. Like for example, even a small thing like helping somebody who's having a bad day cheer up by looking at a beautiful piece of art. That person can go on to give somebody advice that they wouldn't have been able to give if they were inspired. And then that advice could go on to create an empire that helps millions of people. And then each of those millions, so like, you know what I mean? So it cascades. The smallest little things can kick it off. And I think art and inspiration that art can generate is incredibly powerful for that. Man, and so what about the students that you've had? Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I want to let you know that I've got a free book that you can get if you want to tap into more of these resources. And you can get that for free at kylesbook.com. Back to the podcast. What's an experience that you've had that has been emotional, where you've had some feedback or some experience with a student and you were like stop back on it afterwards and said, "Wow, like thank God I had that experience." Give me an example of something that you've had with a student like that.
There's so many, but out of the hundreds of students I work with, the one that really sticks out the most is actually a dance student I had pretty early in my teaching career.
Mm,
And that student sticks out to me because the young lady was absolutely going down the destructive path and
mm,
self-proclaimed. Like she would tell you in a minute, like, hey, this is my name, this is what I do. I know I'm like headed down this, bad area. And she was in my dance class as an elective. When I tell you she had such a raw, untapped talent, like I haven't seen anything really like that before or since. But the
mm.
talent wasn't matching up with the actions, if that makes sense, right? So,
Yeah.
she was doing amazing in my class, and I wanted to see her for a week because she got expelled for fighting and doing something else, right? So when she came back, I had a really good talk with her, and I said, "Look, like your talent is infinite. It can take you literally like anywhere you want to go. Your behavior is going to keep you right here, though. Like, and we got to get you out of this to this, right? Your activities have to
Mm,
match your talent." And she got that. I don't know why, but something resonated with her. She's like, okay, like I see what you're talking about. And it wasn't from a judgy place at all. It was just saying, like, I see so much in you that I need you to change your behavior and match it. And
mm,
so I made a deal with her. I was like, if you stop doing what you're doing in school in your other classes, right? If you actually participate a little bit more, respect your teachers more, right? Stop fighting and all that, I'll make it so that you're more featured in our stance, and not just because you're behaving right, but because you're also a really good dancer. But I need you here, right? Like I can't feature you if you're in my class once every 2 weeks for behavioral issues. And so like I want you to be the star of this piece, but the only way you can do that is to like change these things. And it was a process, right? She said she would try, and I remember like the next week it didn't go well, and she tried again. But over time, Kyle, she started doing it, and it became a habit and
mm,
it was consistent. And she did end up being able to perform in my show and did a great job. And I haven't stayed in touch with her, so I have no idea like if she's still dancing now, what she's doing, if she resorted back to the bad thing she was doing. But the fact that she kind of committed to the plan for a little bit of time that semester was enough for me to be like, wow, you can take a student that literally is over here and move them to here just from a conversation, just from actions and all that, but it takes a real commitment as an educator. And I think what happens so many times is that we don't really sell into our students in that way. Right? We just give them the instruction, we just give them the rules, and we forget the human to human conversation.
mm,
And so students end up dropping out. They end up doing other things because they're not interested. So for me, I always strive to be the educator that I never had kind of thing. Like I always want to be the reason that a student wants to come to school and to do well and to pursue a career. And so that's always informed my teaching. And sometimes faculty, peers get it, sometimes they don't. But for me, the mission is all about preparing the students for what's next for them. So love it or don't love it, like my approach is always student centered.
Man, this beautiful, the story you just told, seriously. And like I said, who knows the impact that that could have going forward? It's amazing. It's like, for me, I never had a teacher like that. I have one example. I think we all have an example of a teacher where we felt kind of if you look back, for me anyways, there's really only one teacher whose name that I can remember immediately, which is crazy because
Hmm.
I had like dozens of teachers over the years. I can only really remember one immediately. It was my science teacher in grade 9, Mr. Buchanan. And this guy, he had a passion for what he was doing, right? And I feel like you've got the same thing where you're helping people in a way where you're enjoying it. And you've got something cool going on with you, man. There's some kind of energy that you got rocking. What's your secret to that? You seem like an actual like genuinely happy, upbeat guy who doesn't have to put on a mask in the morning and pretend to be all happy. Like it seems like you just go out the door and you make people's day because you got the energy to you.
Oh,
What's your secret to that, man? You can tell in your eyes, you know, it's there's something about you.
oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate it, Kyle. Well, two things, right? Number one, my faith. Faith in God for sure.
Yeah.
But number two, it's my journey, right? And I feel like God's blessed me on my journey in a lot of ways. And a lot of those blessings actually came from a lot of hardship, for sure.
Yeah.
Earlier on in my dance career, I got injured like really, really badly, and I couldn't dance for about 6 to 7 months. Had to reparative surgery and all that, and of course, I was in college for dance at the time, so I
Oh,
had all these
really?
questions like, "Oh my God, am I gonna have to like drop out of this program? Am I gonna have to like have a whole different career? This is what I want to do in my life." And so I prayed really hard. I was like, God, I don't know if I'm gonna get through this, but if I do, I'm gonna start taking it a lot more seriously, meaning that it's
Mm,
not going to be about like the vanity of dance, right? It's not going to be because like the popular kids dance, but I want to dance from a real authentic place of like trying to change other people's lives. And when he blessed me to be able to kind of come back from that, um, I was excited and I was honored, but at the same time, I was like, wow, now I got to actually like do what I said I was going to do. And so I started really going deeper with dance and using it as a way to uplift other people and get them out of the things they were going through. So, in my life, I've gone through a lot of loss, a lot of disappointments and all that. But my perspective is that if you're still here and you're still breathing, you've got another chance to fight another day. Simple, right? So I try to impart that to other people. I'm like, yeah, things could be dark, they could be really, really horrific for you, but you're still here for a reason. You're here for a purpose, whether you understand that purpose or not. And so I see part of my reason for being here on earth to bring that out to other people. Be like, what is your mission beyond your profession, beyond your education, where you live, all that stuff? Like, why did God put you here on earth? And what is it that we can do to kind of get that mission out to the world? And it's like you said earlier, Kyle, right? One thing that you do could touch millions. So imagine if like millions of people were tapping into their purpose every single day, like the world would be so much better, right? We would really alleviate some of the major, major issues that we're facing nowadays in the world. So, although I was a dance teacher that turned into entrepreneur, turned into a dean in education, it's like these are hats and these are titles, but my mission has always been to serve, and I think it served me well. No pun intended, right? But
yeah, no, seriously.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm seeing the fruit of it through other people and their successes, and they're starting their own ventures up, and so that's really the blessing for me. Is like when I look back and say, wow, like these are the students I've helped, or the colleagues I've helped, and now they're helping other people. It's to pay it forward. It's no complaints from me. Even on the roughest days, I'm like, I'm here, I'm breathing, I'm blessed. So that's kind of, I think, what you're seeing.
I love it, man. You know, one of the things about artists is okay, creativity comes, the other side of creativity is potentially, and I think there's some truth to this, fear and anxiety. Because on one side, you're creating you for you to have the vision to create something that's the creativity side of it. But the same side on the other side of the coin is the vision or the ability to envision what could go wrong. The anxiety provoking things. It's two sides to the same coin. It's the same thing being expressed in two different ways. And so, what do you say to the people who are struggling with anxiety or stress, because these are the same people who are incredibly creative, but
Yeah.
their creativity is kind of biting them in the ass because it's the other side of it. They can envision the bad things happening just as much as they can envision the beautiful portrait they're going to paint. And so, what do you say to somebody who's struggling with anxiety or fear because of a
Mm.
negative side of creativity?
Wow, I'm so happy you asked that because we don't talk about that enough, and that's
Yeah.
huge. It really is the maker or breaker for creative careers. It's very rarely the talent, and it's very rarely the work ethic. But you're right, it's the fear of failure that gets in our way and stops us from reaching our fullest potential. And what I like to tell other artists who are struggling with that, and this comes from a real place because I dealt with it. We all have dealt with it, and some days I still deal with it. Right, 23 years into this, so it doesn't go away, but it gets easier. And something that makes it easier for me is like when I'm feeling like that, or since other artists are feeling like that, I'm like, put your phone away. And I know that sounds really simple, but so much of this comes from the phone, right? Because we are so inundated with messages and advertising and comparison. Even
Yeah.
indirectly, it's like you scroll on Instagram and you're like, wow, I thought like I could dance, or I thought I lifted that weight well today, or did whatever. And then you see somebody that did something like 10 times better, and you start to compare and feel really bad about yourself in that moment. So for me, it's like, don't look at distractions when you're feeling like that. It's really important to put the phone away and tap into your own stuff, right? Kind of go into a quiet, secluded spot. For me, like this is my home studio. I'm not looking at TV, I'm not looking at anybody else's stuff. It's like, what do I want to create in this moment?
Hmm.
Also, I tell people take away the pressures of the external stuff. So, like, when you're pursuing this as a career, you're always thinking about, well, like, what will the journalists say when they come and see my work? What do the critics think? Will audiences buy this, right? Let all those things go for a moment and just tap into the art itself. And when you do that
Hmm.
and you fall in love with the art yourself, it's not as important what else comes out of people like it as much. It's kind of like, yeah, the art itself feels like a masterpiece to me, and I hope you like it too. But if not, like I feel really, really good about it. And like I've coached a lot of artists in this area, and they always come back and tell me like, wow, when I fell in love with the art, other people did, and some didn't, right? But a lot of other people
Yeah. Yeah.
came
There's
to love
something
it
to that,
too.
man. Yeah.
When you don't like what you're doing and you don't believe in it, that also rubs off as well. So I tell people, like, make sure you love what you created first and foremost. And we know this kind of throughout history, right? Some of the, most prolific art pieces in the world were not really received well in the beginning. They weren't. People didn't know how to take it. They were like, oh, this is weird, this is different, this is not good. But those artists forged forward and kept creating in their own unique style and brand. And eventually they became, masterpieces and classics and all that stuff. But it's really, really rare that you strike gold in the beginning. So I tell people again, love what you're making, love the process of art making, all that, and
Love
then the
that, man.
accolades,
Yeah.
they come.
Hmm. It's beautiful, dude. There's something really to that. Instead of focusing on the result of it, focusing on the process and let the result unfold naturally because it's so easy to get wrapped up in, especially when you have goals and vision with what you need is this is the problem is, for example, if somebody's struggling and they're broke and they need to make money, there's this desperate need for it to work. And that in itself is a paradox because that needing it to work, it blocks you off from the accessing the full creativity that you need to make it work itself. It puts a lot of pressure on it, which kind of constrains you. Whereas to be a creative person, you need to be open and free and able to think in all directions. The one way to think about it is thinking um, divergently instead of convergently or one or the other. I forget which one's which, but being able to start with an idea and then being open to whatever comes as a result of it, but focusing on the process itself. And there's a very spiritual component to that too. It's fascinating, man. So, great advice, seriously. Um,
Thank you. I just want to add real quick too, Kyle. It's like we
yeah,
have to
yeah,
also realize, like, although as artists, right, we're doing really, really important work and we're changing lives and giving inspiration and beauty and all that stuff. We're also not performing life or death work. And that's not a negative thing, it's just a reality. And I see that actually as a blessing. It's like, wow, like we don't have like people's lives in our hands. So sometimes we do apply that level of stress to a situation. But I always tell people, I'm like, you also got to be able to like laugh it off and laugh at
yeah,
yourself, right? Have a sense of humor.
yeah,
So it's like, what's the worst thing in the world if like you put the wrong color on that canvas? Or I remember I got like kicked in a performance one time and kept on going, and it's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Really nothing. Like the show went on, people laughed for a minute. I even laughed, but it was like I was fine, and it was a memorable moment, and I performed like 20 times after that, right? So
Hmm.
the world won't stop spinning if we make a quote unquote mistake. But I think the world, some of our best art teachers, all these people have instilled such a perfectionist mindset into us to the
Right,
point where
yeah.
it's become very, very negative and self-destructive. So I always tell students and mentees and all that, like, let that stuff go. Perfection's a myth. That's not possible. Try to be excellent, but understand nothing's perfect in this world. And if you make a mistake, quote unquote, you will absolutely live through that mistake, and it's all right.
And then maybe have new experiences that wouldn't have come without the mistake. And I
Yes.
think there's opportunities that can open up from a perceived negative. that turns into a major positive looking back on it 3 or 5 years into the future. And then you laugh at it and you say, man, if that didn't happen, X, Y, and Z wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't be in the place that I'm in now. And so that's what's interesting is if you can detach from the emotions in the quote unquote negative moment and step back and realize that, well, first of all, you can reframe it and say, so what are the ways that this could be perceived as a positive? And there are always ways that could be, it's implied by the fact that you're perceiving it as a negative, that there's the other side of the coin. It could be perceived as a positive as well. And it's difficult because we get so wrapped up in the emotion of it. But what you're
Mhm.
saying is that you got to step back and look at the different alternative perspectives that you can take on it, whether it be expanding the timeline, or changing the meaning of it in the moment, which really both are one and the same. There are solutions to the emotions that we can get so wrapped up in. So man, it's amazing. What is a question that I'm not asking, but I should be asking that would be able to provide the most amount of value to an artist or an artistic entrepreneur watching?
Hmm. That's tough because you're really good at asking these questions. I think one thing though I would ask is, what can you do to sustain your career? Because I think so many times we talk
Hmm.
about how to launch a career and overnight success and all
Yeah.
these things, but how do you sustain in the long haul? Because it's one thing to be popular or get that award, do this thing once or twice, for 5 years, but I'm talking like 20 plus years into the game. How do you get to that level?
Right. Hmm. And then to really imagine what that's going to be like and be able to perform as step into that role. You said something
Hmm.
earlier that was interesting, is having a relationship. And the way I perceive that is having a relationship with your future self and being able to
Yes.
step into that role and act as though that person was you already, and then you can move your way there without comparing yourself to it, because that's a recipe for unhappiness, I find. If you're comparing yourself to the goal that you have, then you'll always feel like a failure. There's this gap in between. And so
Yes.
the difference between stepping into that future self without having to compare yourself to it. So it's amazing. So what would you say the answer to that is? To the question that you gave me? What's the answer to it?
Yeah. For my version of the answer for sure would be, you got to pace yourself. And again, I'm giving you some real unconventional answers to these things
Yeah,
because I
here we
really
go.
believe this stuff in my heart, right? But you got to absolutely pace yourself. It's like you're running a race. If you know you got to run X amount of miles, you're not going to just necessarily sprint out the gate and then, you might get winded and not be able to finish. So it's the same thing. If you know you want to do something for 20 years, in my case, like part of my career is dance, which is physical. It's as much artistry as it is sport in some ways, right? So I'm like to do that, and at the age I'm at to do it well and all that stuff, it's like it's got to be a pacing so that I can continue doing what I love to do. And so I would encourage any kind of artist to pace yourself, pace those goals, pace the physicality, pace the productivity, all that stuff. And we get so excited sometimes and things are new and fresh. So you're like, I'm gonna put out 20 albums in 5 years, and not sustainable. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do 45 shows in 2 weeks, not sustainable. Right? These are things that will have you burned out really quickly. You'll be that one hit wonder or that person who was like, wow, so much potential, but they only did this for like 5 years. So I feel blessed that I'm celebrating my 23rd year as a professional working artist. And a lot of that is really because of the pacing. I saw down the line where I wanted to get to, but I realized very early on, like, oh, that's a decade goal, 10 years in the future. Or this is 15 years. So you gotta kind of parse out what you see.
I feel like that's, I mean, personally, that I struggle with that, man. It's hard as hell because,
Yeah,
it's part of my nature. I want to do things 10x. It's like I gotta do X, Y, and Z, and I gotta do it fast. Otherwise, there's a perceived lion in the corner that's gonna eat my ass if I don't do it
exactly.
ASAP, right? And so I
Yeah.
guess the question becomes, how can you do it sustainably? And when you answer that question, a more holistic approach will come to mind. It's all about the questions we ask at the end of the day, man. That's what's so cool about thinking is the quality of the results and the thoughts that you have are the direct result of the questions that go into the answers that you get. What about the marketing side of it? Because there's a lot of starving artists out there, man. A lot of
Yeah.
people that have the artistic prowess and beauty to their work, but are not able to get that message across to other people. So what would you say to that person who's got the talent, but has been unable to really get the message out or really to sustain a career with it?
Hmm. Well, this is a really deep question. This really gets to my purpose too, because what I love to do is help other artists figure that piece out
Yeah.
and so they can do this in the long haul and be happy, but also so they can impact millions of people right over a lifetime. So
Yeah.
I think for me it's twofold. I think marketing is huge, right? And I'll talk about that in a sec, but I do want to kind of preface it with management and self-management, right? And I think for so long artists have given away their power by just assuming to do this professionally, I have to be managed, right? So I have to have a manager, I have to have a publicists have to have an agent. And those roles are really great and really powerful, but they're not for everybody. And it's not something that's absolutely required for success. And I think that's just been beaten to us for so long, right? Our mindset has always been, we can't do this without somebody else. And I
Mm.
think now we know that's false, right? Because of technology and all that and
Especially
social media.
today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can absolutely do this without all that if that's what you choose to do. But that means that then you have to have the skill set, the know-how, and the discipline to fill those roles yourself. So what I did very early on after college, I said, well, I want to be a professional dancer, but I don't want to do the traditional thing of like moving to LA or New York, auditioning every day for gigs, hoping and praying you get agent representation and all of that. So I kind of want to do this my own way, stay in Philly and stuff. So I went to school for arts administration to learn the business of the art. That's the option I chose, but obviously do not have to do that at all. Or you can totally go a different way and look online and work with mentors. There's just so many ways to learn nowadays. So, and we're talking like 14 years ago, by the way. So nowadays, where you can learn without all that. But that was the path I took. And I was really proud of the fact that I was an independent artist and started loving when I would book a gig and sign the contract and book my first media appearance. It was fun, and I fell in love with the process. So I encourage artists to give that a try. Right? Don't be so afraid of the independent route because you might find out like, hey, this is fun, but also you might be damn good at it. And a lot of people always like to tell artists you're only good at making art, you're only good at performing, but that's not true. Right? We're some of the brightest minds on the planet, some of the most resourceful, resilient people. So tap into that.
Yeah.
Don't limit yourself to say, I'm just an artist. You could very well be an artist entrepreneur if that's what you choose to do. But number two, right, to answer your question around the marketing, the PR, I absolutely love it. I have such a passion for that, sharing my stories with the media. I think a lot of that is because I do have a degree in communications and like did some internships at news stations and things, freelance writing over the years. So although I left the communications world, I found I was using those skills very rapidly on this freelancer track and this entrepreneur track. So, like in my first year of like going independent and doing my own company and things, like we got about 25 media features in our first year. And I was
Hmm.
like, oh, this is really cool, like giving interviews and like booking and stuff. So started doing media trainings to help other artists do the same things. And so some of those best practices to really like connect with folks who are hosting the shows you want to be on, who are writing the articles you want to be featured in, get to know those people and from an authentic place. Don't just hit them up and ask to be booked and featured. It's like, no, like
Right.
get a cup of
Mm.
coffee, have a call, figure out who they are and what they care about and all that. Build a genuine relationship so that when the time is right, you'll be on their mind and it will be a natural thing instead of this cringy like do this do that for me, right?
Yeah.
So that's my advice. Also, like using social media, it is so easy now, although the algorithms are wonky sometimes. It's pretty
True.
easy to find your slice of the pie within that lane. So tap into the audience you want to reach by developing content they want to see. I think for a lot of artists, they don't even have the first part figured out. So when I ask them, well, what's your target audience? Who is it? Everybody. And I'm like, nope, 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 that's impossible. You can, if you're trying to speak to everybody, you're actually speaking to nobody,
Yep.
right? You
Yep.
got
Yep.
to pick a target audience. And I always tell people it's not about limiting, it's not about exclusion, anything like that. Your audience is always going to be diverse inherently, but if you only have one group that you would spend your marketing dollars on, what's
Mm.
the group that's most likely to love what you're doing so much that they become like lifelong super fans of you and your work? That's worth marketing to, right? In terms of dollars and cents and ROI, return on investment. So yeah, find out who that target audience is, find them on social media, and don't do the old school like build it and buy it type of thing. Actually find out from them what do you want to see. And I
I
don't
love
know,
that.
who you follow
Yeah.
online, but the people I follow online, they do that a lot. They're like, hey, here's a poll. Like, what type of album do you want? Like, what kind of show do you want to see? And that matters that you're not spinning your wheels and wasting your precious time, money, and energy, but you're actually delivering online in a way that will resonate with your intended audience. And so I know those things aren't always the most fun to people who rather just be in the studio all day, but I challenge you just say, I'm going to work on this for 30 minutes a day It might then turn into an hour a day because you might really enjoy it. So
Yeah.
don't count yourself out. Don't knock it until you try it.
And I think a good question to ask in that situation is how could I enjoy it? What would have to be true in this situation for me to really enjoy the marketing piece of it? And then you can start
Yes.
to leverage your visionary artistic charisma and be able to channel that into the marketing side of it for the creation and the promotion of it. And one of the things that comes to mind with the tapping into the target audience is being able to make the relationships, like you said, with the people who already have access to the target audience and being able to form a joint venture, not as oh, let me just use you for your audience and post this for me, do this for me, blah, blah, blah. But like you
Exactly.
said, form a genuine relationship with them and have the possibly the promotion or what have you unfold organically. And there's something to that. And you see it all the time. An example that comes to mind is even with like Dr. Dre and Eminem or Eminem and 50 Cent, there's like this, how could I put it? This organic flow that comes from a connection that starts it off, and then millions of dollars are made as a result of their art because of tapping into other people's audiences, which is your target audience at the end of the day. So there's something to be said about that too, man. Beautiful, brother. Dude, is there anything else? What else do you have to add in terms of this conversation?
Yeah. This has been so awesome, Kyle. I think something I'll add real quick is I want artists again to not give up. And I know that's kind of like my overarching theme of the day, but it's intentional because there are literally a million and one reasons to give up. And so I encourage you not to fall for those reasons, right? Write
Mm.
down one or two or three reasons why you can't quit. So again, whether it's a family member, whether it's that, a young child who's watching you perform on stage in hopes of being what you are, or beyond, right? Like write down the reason that you cannot give up on what you're doing and then tap into that because we're losing so many amazing artists, just to societal pressures and different things. And we can't afford that. Art is such a powerful, uniting thing and such a blessing to this earth. Like, we need people to actually be able to work professional artists full time and preferably, even part time if they could do that, so they could do other things too if they choose. But it's really important that we support our artists too, because a lot of the fans and industry folks are always like, "Oh man, I can't believe they called it quits." But my question to them sometimes is like, "But did you also support them? Did you buy
Uh,
their tickets when they had them available? Did you go to a show? Did you share on social media for free?" So it takes this is my motto, and people know who follow me online, but it takes a village to raise an artist, and we can't do this by ourselves. So yeah, we can be great at what we do, but we also need the strength of our support system, or else it doesn't work. You can have a million paintings sitting around, you can have 100 shows, 100 songs in your mind, but without an activated support system, it's not going to go anywhere. And so it's a team effort here. So I just encourage people to support artists, but also encourage artists to support themselves and give people a reason to get behind you. That would be my parting message for sure.
give them a reason to get behind you. Yeah, there's something to that. So it comes down to being able to tell the story and connect with individuals as opposed to just trying to connect with everybody. That's kind of something interesting about the psyche of an artist is because we're so open by nature that it's like, well, we think that we can attract everybody because we are attracted to everybody because we've got the openness to be able to have the appreciation for anything. And we think that other people could do the same. But what you're saying is, in actuality, pick something narrow and niche it down and write to them or sing to them or dance for them and or paint for them and have that it's interesting because what that implies is that you're writing for them, and that means you're turning other people away. And it's necessary, but it's also for the artist's mind, there's a divisive nature to that. So it's easy to kind of be opposed to it, but it's necessary if you want to get known. They say like you're not doing it right unless you're pissing some people off, and there's something to that.
Exactly.
There's something to
Yes,
that,
there
man.
is.
Yeah, seriously.
Well,
Uh,
prime example, right? One of the biggest superstars out there right now has made a brilliant decision to like cross genres and try something totally new. And I think it's awesome. But this person was able to do that because she niched down, right? And she built her such a loyal fan base to the point where like she can go into any genre and do anything in the industry and they're gonna back it 1,000%, right? So yeah, it takes time, and you can't start out the gate doing that, right? That's something that takes like 25 years in the making, sort of situation. But there will be a time for we were like, you can experiment more with different audiences, different genres, different mediums, and all that. And even as you're building your career, right? You might say, all right, I'm a soul singer, but who's to say you can't show your versatility and do a jazz piece or, gospel or country or rock? And so, like, you're not going to lose your versatility and your ability and all that, right? That's your talent. The talent of artists is like the ability, the things you can do. And we all can do a lot of things because that's how we're trained. But artistry, that's what a lot of us are missing. That's really who you are as an artist.
Hmm.
What's your specialty, right? What is how do you identify as an artist basically in this really, really broad, chaotic,
Yeah.
all-consuming landscape? How do people remember you? And so, like, yeah, we have Queens of Soul, we have like rock legends, right? Like people pick their lane, and that's not to say that's all they do and all they can do. Their talent is endless, but you got to be known for something, And once you've built up that loyalty, that fan base over the years, and they trust you, they'll ride with you when you decide to go up a different street. But it's really about
Hmm.
strategic timing when you do that. And I think sometimes artists try to do that way, way, way too early in their career, and it
Uh,
confuses the people actually, and it stops the fan support because they're like, we don't really know who you are. So make sure
yeah.
they know you before you switch streets.
That's interesting. You're tapping into something that's it's absolutely crucial when it comes to branding, for example, and marketing, because you have to be known for something. For example, in Japan, when Honda was created, Honda was a motorcycle company. So nobody wanted to buy a Honda car when they launched Honda cars to Japan because they were like, why would I buy a car from a motorcycle company? It's like Harley Davidson creating a Sportster. It's like there's some disconnect there, right? So what they had to do was change marketplaces to a land, let's say the United States, who had no preconceived notion of Honda being a motorcycle company, and they branded themselves as an automobile company here. And so that's the thing. If you try to, let's say you're branded as a folk singer, but then you try to rebrand as a rock singer too soon, then there's this disconnect, and you're kind of creating confusion in terms of your identity and the perception of it in the marketplace. And you got to be careful with that. And so yeah, you're tapping into some crucial marketing fundamentals, and it's cool. It comes naturally to you. You understand it at a deep level without having to speak about it in marketing geek terms like I'm talking about it. So it's talking about the same
No,
thing. It's
no.
just different way of looking at it, but it's the same thing at the end of the day. So
And I
man, dude,
went through it too, so like I can speak from the heart on it because it's like I made that mistake, Kyle, very early on. And I'm very transparent, as you can tell, right? So tell about my successes and my perceived failures kind of thing. And yeah, very early on, I was like a dance company only and worked really, really hard to be known as like the dancer. And when I did that, I was ready to expand into other art forms. So I remember when I launched my arts academy, we started teaching not only dance, but like visual arts, creative writing, musical theater. And I don't think people were confused, but they were just like, this is different. Like you're literally like the dancer that like has gotten national press. Like with this like arts academy thing, it was a whole different lane. And I did that like my second year into the journey, and I realized like, oh wow, like maybe that should have come a little bit later. We always say that stuff in hindsight, but basically I know what it can be like when you are doing too much too soon and it's not strategic enough and all that. So that's why I try to just help other people avoid some of those really expensive and painful.
yeah, and we've gotten into some of them today, man. I think that we've covered a lot of ground in terms of the mistakes that we can avoid and what we can move towards instead. So, Roger, man, thank you so much for being here, dude. Anything else you want to add before we kick this off? It's been a very cool conversation.
Oh no, had such a great time with you. Yeah, I would just love people to connect with me. I'm very
Yeah, yeah.
open book, and love connecting with folks. So I'm online. My website's rogerleearts.com. And then you can follow me on social media, so Facebook, as well as Twitter, now it's X, and Instagram. And it's all at Roger Lee Arts. We're also on YouTube. So check it out. You'll see like cool custom paintings I do, paintings you can get, dance shows you can support, even if you're like in a different city or country. Like you can help our local families in need that way by buying a ticket for them. So there's a lot of cool ways you can get involved with what we're doing. So we just love to connect with you online and help you out any way I can.
Beautiful. Roger, man, thank you so much for being here, dude. It's been an absolute pleasure. Seriously.
Thank you, Colin. I want to thank you for this opportunity. And again, what you're doing is so awesome. I just hope you know that as well. And yeah, just keep going because you got something really, really special.
Man, thank you so much, dude. It means a lot, seriously. So we'll keep in touch, brother, and I appreciate you. You got a cool vibe to you, man. So keep that going too, and we'll keep in touch, man. I appreciate you big time. All right. I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. And if you want to get a free copy of my book, go to kylesbook.com and you can get a copy there. I'll talk with you soon.